Thank you everyone for being here. This was probably one of the hardest panels that we had to set up because of the nature of it. I think it's not fair for me to not address the elephant in the room when I say these are challenging times and these are challenging topics that we have. And for that, we are truly grateful to have Mr. Shahril from UMNO, who made time to come for our event, Zairil especially, who has come in from Penang for this session and will go back to Penang after this session. So I think across the both of them for making time to come out and talk on what we hope to be a very interesting debate. A few things I'd like to lay out first. We will run it as a proper debate first, so I will give both speakers 7 minutes to present to give just substantive speeches, so there will be 2 7-minute speeches, and then they will pose a question to their opponent. After that will be an open Q&A of 30 minutes. Given the nature of the debate, we are focusing it on the economy of Malaysia. We are looking at economic policies. We want this to be a policy debate. As such, I kindly request that any questions, or all the questions, we will take them, but we really hope that you focus them on the debate itself and on the policies that we're talking about today. That is the goal of this session, to have a fruitful debate, a proper debate on policy, on where we are heading, on what we're going to do next. Before we start, I will do a coin toss to see who goes first. The outcome was tails, which was won by Mr. Shahril. So Shahril has chosen to go second, while Zairil will go first. I invite the 2 speakers to approach the podium. So Zairil, you can approach the one on your right, one on the left. I will prompt you when your time has started, and then 1 minute when your time is about to end. You may begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see Shahril. The proposition we have today is the Malaysian economy moving on the right path. The simple answer to that question is obviously a resounding no. How is it even possible for us to imagine that our economy is moving in the right direction when there's been nothing but bad news for our country? Nothing but bad news. In fact, the only piece of good news we've had of late was the removal of Ahmad Maslan from the Ministry of Finance. So, okay, one piece of bad news. Don't take my word for it. Let's ask Malaysians what they think. I happen to cite a poll that was done by a Malaysian polling organization in March this year, which found that only 26% of Malaysians believe the country to be headed in the right direction. 26%. That's the numbers that George Bush was seeing in second term towards the end of his presidency. 26% is unprecedented in Malaysia. No government has ever had such low approval ratings. But even worse, this was in March. March, before Tabung Haji happened, March, which is before Mara happened, March, before Deputy Prime Minister was sacked, before the Attorney General was sacked, before the Prime Minister received the 2.6 billion ringgit donation, possibly from the South. You should have answered your Nigerian emails. But perhaps, you say, okay, this is the sentiment in Malaysia, we may not believe what Malaysians think, my opponent may not agree with what Malaysians think. After all, 52% of Malaysians voted against his party in the last election, although they still, I don't understand how. But let's actually ask the rest of the world. And I think the answer to that is quite clear. Judging by the performance of our currency right now, it's 3.9 ringgit to $1, to $1 US. 3.9. It's the worst in 17 years. It's the worst performing currency in Asia right now. So what does this reflect? obviously reflects extremely low levels of investor confidence in our economy. That's why we're seeing capital flight, that's why we're seeing everyone shorting the ringgit. So it's very clear, not only Malaysians, but the rest of the world as well feel that our economy is moving in the wrong direction. Now, I'm very sure my opponent will later bring out some points. He's going to say, well, despite all these problems, despite recessions, there has been growth. Where we're growing, GDP is going at 4 or 5% a year, although firstly, it has slowed down compared to 5 years before. But I think it's even more important to delve down into what the growth really means. Firstly, let's deconstruct it. Where is the growth coming from? And the growth really is, if you look at it, coming from 3 sectors: construction, infrastructure, and oil and gas. If you look at the property sector, manufacturing, all these have slowed down quite considerably. What does this mean? This means it is a lot of public infrastructure-driven growth. It's basically government-financed growth. So we ask, is this a sign of a healthy economy? Secondly, even if there is growth, the question is, who is benefiting from this growth? And if we look at our GDP again and we break it down, we'll find that only 28% of our GDP comes from wage share or labor share. If you look at other countries, in the UK it's 55%, in Japan it's 52%, Singapore is 40%. So in Malaysia it's very low, 28% of our GDP is from wages. So that means that yes, there is growth numbers, we are seeing growth, but it's not trickling down, it's not benefiting Malaysians. My opponent will probably also say that we have also had growth and increase in our gross national income, GNI, which is not insignificant. Yeah, and he'll say because of this, Malaysians have become richer. But the question is, who is really getting richer? Because at the same time, while our GNI has been growing, so has our Gini coefficient. We now have the highest levels of income inequality in the whole of Southeast Asia. This means that while a few rich Malaysians are getting far, far richer, the rest of Malaysians are remaining poor. In fact, if you look at the sales of Proton cars in the first quarter of this year, it was down 40%. On the other hand, the sales of Porsches in Malaysia have gone up 200% first quarter of this year. So yes, some Malaysians are getting richer. And while we're on the topic of income, perhaps we can talk about household income. It's a number that the government likes to talk about. They say household income has increased, the average Malaysian family has become richer. Again, I think we have to really look at the numbers and see whether it's telling us the right picture. Now, as most Malaysians are reliant on wage as their main source of income, I think it's more accurate that we delve into the wage numbers. And the wage numbers don't look good. The median wage for Malaysians in 2013, according to DOS, is 1,700 ringgit a month. Median wage. This means that at least half of all Malaysian workers earn only 1,700 and below. Is that high income? Is that even middle income? That's actually low income. But maybe to give a more specific example, let's take Selangor, the richest state in Malaysia, the most industrialized state. Selangor has obviously a median wage which is higher than the rest. It's 2,000 ringgit a month last year. And that was an increase of 20 ringgit in nominal terms from the year before 2013, 1980 to 2,000 a month now. But at the same time, although wages increased by 20 ringgit a month, petrol prices went up by an average of 20 cents last year. Now for an average guy who drives a Myvi and he fills up his tank once a week, that represents 32 ringgit extra petrol bill every month. So while his salary went up 20 ringgit, his petrol bill went up by 32 ringgit. Already every month he is 12 ringgit poorer. So obviously this points to the fact that wages are extremely low in Malaysia. Cost of living is increasing at a faster rate than the growth of wages. So obviously, I think suffice to say, I've got a few other points on poverty, debt, and so on, but I'll leave that to later. Suffice to say, our economy is not moving in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, YB Zairil. Shahril, your time starts now.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera and good morning just to everyone present. Utamanya lawan debat saya pada hari ini yang berhormat Saudara Zairil, Khir, Johari, Ahli Parlimen Bukit Bendera, para pemimpin pelajar, mahasiswa Malaysia baik dari dalam ataupun luar negeri, sahabat-sahabat pemerhati, hadirin hadirat yang saya hormati sekalian. Pertamanya, izinkan saya ambil masa sedikit untuk mengucapkan terima kasih tahniah kepada pihak penganjur, pihak UPAC kerana berjaya mengadakan satu debat antara saya dan Yang Mohd Zairil. Satu debat yang saya rasa sihat, yang mana saya sendiri pernah berkecimpung dalam kepimpinan UPAC suatu ketika dahulu. 2007-2008 feels like a really long time ago. Pada hemat saya, debat seperti ini adalah satu perkara yang perlu kita raikan sebagai satu petanda pada keterbukaan ataupun kematangan politik kita. Saudara-saudara sekalian, topik yang diberi is Malaysia's economy moving or on the right track. Adakah ekonomi Malaysia berada pada satu landasan yang betul? Pada hemat saya, sebelum kita nak melihat jalan ke hadapan ataupun kita nak pandang ke hadapan, ada gunanya, ada baiknya kita imbau sedikit sejarah. Sejauh mana perjalanan ekonomi negara kita selama ini. It is prudent when we face a topic like this, I think, to just take a step back and have a look at how far we've come, how much we've achieved in our time. Saudara-saudara sekalian, Malaysia sejak merdeka telah bergerak jauh daripada satu negara berasaskan pertanian and agrarian society to a country that bears many of the hallmarks of a developed economy. Our services sector, for example, constitutes more than half of our entire GDP. A GDP that has grown in real terms 15 times since the 1970s, since the introduction of the NEP. Our overall poverty rates have fallen from the highs of 50%. Imagine that half of the entire country's population in 1970 living under the poverty line. Today, that number, the incidence of poverty stands at 0.6%, 0.6%. We have been a marquee investment destination for decades. Our infrastructure is at par with the first world, and we can boast a number of Malaysian MNCs, Malaysian homegrown MNCs, who are investing and operating all over the world. Now, for those who think that these performances are somehow ordinary, are inevitable, or for those who rush, those of us who rush to compare us and want so much to compare ourselves with city-states like Singapore, like Hong Kong, I persuade you just pause a second and consider some other examples. Consider countries who achieved independence about the same time as we did, who started off from a similar resource base, who are countries with sizable enough to make a fair comparison. Countries like Ghana, countries like Honduras, countries like Egypt. In 1957, our GDP was at par, similar to those of Ghana, Egypt, and Honduras. In fact, we were 5% below Ghana. Today, ladies and gentlemen, our GDP, our national income, is 8 times that of Ghana, 5 times that of Honduras, 2.5 times that of Egypt. Now, to be sure, I'm not suggesting that everything is hunky-dory or everything has been perfect all this while. Kita tak kata bahawa Malaysia ini dalam perjalanan ekonomi kita sempurna. Tidak. Dalam masa 50 lebih tahun, merdeka sudah pasti ada kekurangan. Sudah pasti ada kesilapan, ada gajah putih dan sebagainya. Neither am I saying that all that is good in Malaysia is down to one party, one government, or even one leader. I'm not saying that. Rather, what I'm saying is that as much as we want to strive for bigger and better things, and we should strive for bigger and better things, there's something to be said about being proud of how far we've come. There's something to be said about being proud of our economic journey, or as one Joseph Stiglitz put it, our Malaysian miracle. Now that's my bit on history. Like all of you, I'm anxious about the present, I'm anxious about the future, I'm anxious about what the future holds for our country. But to address the question of whether we are on the right track, let's just take it back to the actual debate proposition, debate topic. Adakah kita berada pada landasan yang betul? Let me just point out a very elementary but nonetheless very important fact. That is, no economy is ever in a state of perfection or completion. Tak ada ekonomi dalam dunia ini across space and time yang akan ada dalam satu situasi yang lengkap, yang sempurna. Kalau selesai satu cabaran hari ini, besok ada cabaran lain untuk diselesaikan. Malah kadang-kadang kita dah selesai satu cabaran tu hari ini, kita ingat kita dah dapat jawapan, tapi besok disebabkan perubahan pola ekonomi global, jawapan yang kita cari hari ini dah tak laku, dah kena cari jawapan lain. So there's no, just bear in mind that there's no ultimate Zen outcome here. There is no double line the bottom of the sheet to show that you solve a math problem. That's just not how economics works. The best you can do, the best you can hope for, is continuous development, continuous growth, more and more people in prosperity and all at a good pace. And in that context, and in the context of the debate, let's look at our more recent achievements, some of which have been conceded and accepted by my opponent. Let's put aside, we'll not forget, but let's put aside our past achievements and look at the more recent ones. Over the past 5 years, as my opponent conceded, GNI per capita has grown at 8% year on year. Household incomes, as much as he likes to rubbish it, that's a pretty good indicator. 10% year on year. That's more money in people's pockets, more money in ordinary families' pockets, more money for people to spend and stimulate the economy. Realize private investment. He tries to say that public investment is the only one that's driving growth. That's actually factually untrue. Private investment has grown at 13% year on year over the past 5 years, compared to 5% before the launch of the EDP. What does that mean? That means more investment from the private sector, more jobs for people, more opportunities for young people like yourselves. And we don't just focus on top-line growth numbers. We focus on rural development as well. 4,000 kilometers worth of roads have been built. 330,000 households in rural areas now have access to clean water that didn't 5 years ago. So all of this point to an economic philosophy. And by the way, all of this done while reducing the fiscal deficit from 6 to 3%.
This 7 minutes, please wrap up the speech.
This points to a trend or a philosophy which I think I'll expound upon later in the debate. But I think I just want to close that as much as I'll address the more direct critiques that my opponent put forth previously, I just want to say for the purposes of the debate and by way of introductory statement, I can feel emphatically, yes, we are on the right track and this government still represents the best way to move this economy forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So my opponent mentioned that there is no perfect economy in the world. I completely agree. Except I would also say that there are some economies far more imperfect than others. And the Malaysian economy is one such example. We have the highest inequality in the whole of Southeast Asia, as I mentioned earlier. We have poorly distributed productivity. Our household income is actually the highest in terms of ratio to the GDP, the highest in all of Asia. And every year we have got new financial scandals coming in, coming out, year in, year out. In fact, it's now like every month these days. So the question is, why is this happening? Why is our economy facing so many problems? And the answer to that is very fundamental. We have extremely poor policy making. I'll give you one example. Yeah? Our national automotive policy. Now in the 1980s, the government decided that they were going to industrialize, turn Malaysia into an industrialized economy. One of the ways is to manufacture a national car. So they came up with Proton. Now I'm here to say that Proton has made Malaysians poorer. And why is that? Now, what did the national automotive policy do? It effectively turned the government into a car dealer, right? It sells cars. So what does a car dealer want to do? A car dealer wants to sell as many cars as they can, obviously. So what happens when you put policy instruments in the hand of a car dealer? Obviously, they're going to use it to distort the market in their favor, which is exactly what happened. Car credit became so accessible because they wanted, the government wanted every Malaysian to own a car. So we had 9-year loans for cars and so on. It's extremely unheard of. Secondly, they imposed extremely high levies on imported cars, thus making all other cars more expensive and forcing people to buy Proton, which is not cheap, by the way. And thirdly, because the government is incentivized to sell as many cars as possible, obviously they don't invest in public transport infrastructure. Hence, we have very underdeveloped, immature public transport, not enough buses, not enough trains, because the government wants to sell cars. That's why they build roads, that's why they build so many highways. But as a result of that, because Malaysians have no public transport option, they are forced to buy, not only forced to buy cars, but forced to buy expensive cars. Because, as I said, Protons are not cheap, and everything else is more expensive. And this has the result of obviously decreasing Malaysian disposable income, reducing purchasing power, reducing consumption, and having an overall effect on the economy. So that's one example of poor policy making affecting our economy. The second example I would give, recently in the 11th Malaysia Plan, the Prime Minister said we have to take care of the bottom 40%, we have to increase their income. I completely agree with that. that is the right approach. However, can you even take that sentence seriously when on the one hand the government says we have to increase the wages of about 40%, but on the other they also announced that an MOU has been signed with Bangladesh that will see an influx of 500,000 low-skilled, low-wage Bangladeshi workers coming to our shores in the next 6 months. So how is bottom 40% Malaysians going to compete with low-skilled, low-wage Bangladeshi workers? Obviously, it's a race to the bottom, depressing wages and causing economic problems. Now, the other problem that we have, besides poor policy making, is also very poor public institutions. The Malaysian economy is characterized by many literature as having one that's characterized by corruption, cronyism, rent-seeking, state monopoly capitalism. In fact, The Economist ranked us number 3 in the world for crony capitalism. At least that's one ranking that we do well in. But what is the result of this? We have an extremely distorted economy. My opponent said that actually a lot of our growth is private investment. But let me ask you this, what is private investment in Malaysia? Consider the fact that 54% market capitalization of KL Composite Index belongs to GLCs and GLICs. 1/3 of Bursa Malaysia also belongs to GLCs and GLICs. GLCs control holding stakes in utilities, retail, banking, transportation, warehousing. Even if you look at healthcare, we must be the only country in the world where the government owns public hospitals and private hospitals. Sime Darby, KPJ, Pantai, Prince Court, all owned by the government. Even if you look at education, we've got public universities, of course, we've got public schools. We also have private schools, like international schools like Tenmi, which are also owned by the government. Upit Group of College, Upit University, Asia Pacific Group, all owned by the government. UD10, MMU, all owned by government-linked corporations. And the GLCs are now crowding out the private sector in almost every field. Look at construction, look at development. The big developers, SP Setia, UMNO, Sunrise, they've all been bought out by the government. They're crowding in on everything. Even Tony Roma's and Burger King is owned by Equinas, which is a government-linked corporation. So the next time you have ribs, think of the Prime Minister. Our economy has also facilitated the creation of super cronies. People like Tan Sri Sai Mokhtar who own everything. He owns the sugar, he owns the rice, he owns the post office, he owns Proton, he owns Modernas, he owns Honda, he owns gas station, he owns Alam Flora, he owns Malakoff, he owns ports, Port Tanjung Lepas, Penang Port, he owns Senai Airport, almost everything else. What kind of an economy is this that we have created? Are we on the right path? If you think that by creating an uncompetitive and rent-seeking economy is correct, then we are, but if not, we're not, obviously. Now, I just want to say, the problem with this is that we do not have proper governance and proper protocols in place to prevent corruption and to prevent rent-seeking. That is why we have cases like 1MDB, where billions and billions of ringgit can be moved around the world in suspicious circumstances, using offshore accounts. We've got large payouts written into agreements, questionable bond issuance by Goldman Sachs, very little due diligence, and so many other allegations of misappropriation. Would a country with proper governance protocols allow the Prime Minister to receive 2.6 billion ringgit in donations? I think not. I think not. And I think everyone here will agree. Now, lastly, I would also like to say we also have bad politics. In 2009, the Prime Minister took over, he had a new mandate. He said, we're going to be more transparent, we're going to be more merit-driven, market-friendly, we're going to have needs-based affirmative action. What happened to all that? Obviously, the political situation has made him roll back on all these changes, and that is why we are stuck here again at square one, a middle-income country, trapped in a middle-income trap, unable to make that jump. And that is why, again, I have to say, we are not moving in the right direction.
Thank you, YB Zairil. Shahril, you have 7 minutes for that final speech.
Thanks, Mr. Moderator. I want to use a good part of this second series of remarks to engage with some of the arguments that my opponent put forth. He does a fairly good job of painting what I believe to be an overly bleak picture. An overly bleak picture about the future ahead. Ringgit falling, quotes a couple of controversies, cherry some stats, but that's their regular MO, so no surprise. Now, the first thing to say about the more present trends is that my colleagues in the BN and I, we're not blind to these facts. We know there are certain trends that are slightly worrying. The trends about the ringgit falling, obviously the oil prices tanking is not helpful for our economy, so we're not blind to this. But like I said, like I foreshadowed It's something that's needed in an economy, and it's not basically in conflict with the idea of bringing up the bottom 40%, affording them with better jobs, higher paying jobs, and this argument that bringing foreign workers with depressed wages, I mean, that's textbook economics year one. That's not actually supported by facts anywhere in the world. He complains about GLCs being involved in the private sector. How many of you guys actually want to work for GLC? Maybe you're not going to raise your hands now. I'm pretty sure many of you waiting outside to speak to some of the HR guys outside. What is wrong with GLCs in and of itself? Have we bought in so much to some Republican debates in the US that we hate any state intervention in the economy? Have we come to that? There is no economic argument beyond neoliberal textbook arguments, libertarian stuff that maybe YB Zairil loves because he goes to ideas all the time. That economy or state-run economy is necessary. And that argument then let's never being at the brink of replacing the US as a superpower. So that's the reality. And I could go on about how some of these arguments are flawed, but I think the main point here is the disingenuity in the opposition's arguments and the opposition's approach when talking about anything around the economy. And let me just say one thing to basically close. It's one thing to have a plan, and it's one thing to take down a plan or criticize a plan. But what's your plan? Look at the economic manifesto, the buku jingle. The only thing that they put forth as a solid economic manifesto is the buku jingle. And they pretend that everything, and by the way, if you haven't read the buku jingle, don't bother, let me summarize it for you. It's a ballooning list of subsidies. Ballooning list of subsidies with no credible plan on how to pay for it. And I could go through the numbers later, but my point here is that it's very easy to slam the government. It's easy to slam the government. You look at our 11 measure plan, you pick some holes here and there. But what's your plan? Ask them. What's their plan to increase productivity? What's their plan to reduce inequality? What's their plan to control demand? You ask them this specific question, I'll tell you what happened. One, the idea has no answer. Or if they have an answer, they'll go on with waffly conceptual generalities. Or thirdly, you ask them that same question and you get 3 different answers depending whether they talk the fast, easy, or bigger. That's the problem.
Well, now it's question time. So, I'll first invite YB Zairil to present to his opponent on his speech. Joshua will have 5 minutes at max to answer that rebuttal, and the same will apply, and then we'll open to the floor. YB Zairil?
Thank you. To my opponent, do you believe the Malaysian economy can flourish and compete globally when the domestic economic environment is rife with corruption, cronyism, lack of accountability at the highest of levels? For example, where even government corporations like the one in DB can be abused wantonly, and where government leaders can receive 2.6 billion ringgit in donations into their personal account, a sum that is even more than the net worth of Tan Sri Tony Fernandez.
Yeah, well, bro, I was on a roll, now you throw me a hot potato like this. DB and whatnot. Come on. If the question is, do I believe that we can flourish when there are, as you put it, issues? I mean, those are the way you would characterize it. I would obviously not stand here and agree that our economy is rife with corruption, that our economy is rife with cronyism. I'm not going to agree to that. Obviously, there are problems, and I'm happy to concede that there are problems in our economic setup. There will always be problems. And I think the point here is, when you make economic plans, or when you judge as students or as people judging both sides, you've got to judge the value of economic stewardship based on the progress that we've made, based on the plans we've had to address these challenges that we have set. So things like corruption, it's something that's always been around, it's something that always inflames passion. But look at the stats. We've actually improved in terms of ranking, in terms of the corruption perception index. We've done a lot of things. We've set up over the past 10 years or so, stuff like the MACC, to basically root out and attack any action of corruption that happened both in private or public sphere. So we've got the institutions set up. That's something that we've put forth in the past decade. We've actually seen results in terms of corruption perception improving. And is it a done deal? Are we complete? Of course not. What I'm saying is, don't let these ongoing problems or ongoing challenges that we've always faced, and we've always had to deal with, deter from the fact that we've got a lot of things going right for us. Don't pretend or don't assume that the economy is something that you have to solve sequentially. It's not. You always have things that are imperfect. You can throw out stuff like inequality, corruption, whatever. But that's not to say that you have to solve all of that in completion, in perfection, which you never do, before you look at other things, like increasing household incomes, like increasing GDP growth, like increasing private investment. So you've basically got to see economy, I think, as a holistic issue. And if you cherry pick here and there some negatives, sure, we'll paint a big picture, but then what will happen is that, we'll basically be able to also then point out positive stuff that I think won't necessarily be productive for discussion. So I think a brief answer is that yes, I believe our domestic economy is still flourishing in spite of whatever issues that always occurred in our country. Thanks.
Thank you, Shahril. And I invite you to pose one question to YB Zairil on his speech. May I ask to keep your question concise?
I was going to go with something friendly, but maybe it will be more abrasive.
As long as it's concise, it's fine.
Sure. YB Zairil, we've seen fractions in the opposition pact, in Pakatan or whatever it's called right now. And we've seen parties break up, and we've seen ideologies shift between one another and actually conflict one another. My question to you is, if Nauzubillah would win in the general election one day, what kind of fractions do you foresee happening between these three parties? Now that when you actually have tasted power and having to share power if you were to win, what kind of fractions do you foresee, and how would that impact any confidence in having a clear and predictable economic policy?
Thank you for the question. We want to talk about fractures in political parties. I think there's also one happening in another party in government right now. In fact, more than one party. Who's the president of MIC today? Did the deputy president of UMNO not berate his own prime minister in his speech in Johor yesterday? It sounds to me like it's fractures everywhere. But that's not the point. The point is that despite all three parties in 2008 and later in 2013 coming together with very different and divergent ideologies, I think we've still managed to run Penang and Selangor well. And that shows that when it comes to governance, it's something else altogether. There's politics, there's everything that happens at a political level, but there's also, when it comes to governance, everyone has shown and proven that we can sit down, we can work out policies. I'm just going to use Penang as an example, since I'm from Penang. We have managed, since we took over in 2008, increased our, you spoke about FDI. Penang has been a leader in FDI for Malaysia in the last 7 years. In fact, the amount of investment we've gotten is double the amount in the last 7 years before 2008. We're talking about 40 billion ringgit compared to 20 billion ringgit. Investor confidence in Penang is booming. You said last year FDIs went up for Malaysia, so did it go up for Penang. And generally, I think investor confidence has come into Penang because we've been able to just make a few very fundamental reforms. And this is what we're talking about. If we were to come into power, it's very simple. Although all three parties, if you're going to use these three parties as the current dynamic, we all have different views on many issues. We all have different views in political identity. We have all different views in ideology. However, we are all concerted in fighting corruption. We are all concerted. We all agree that our economy needs reform. We agree that we need to rationalize JLCs. We agree that there needs to be less rent-seeking in an economy. We don't agree that it's okay to have growth, as he said, to have corruption as long as there's growth. We don't agree. Because we believe that Malaysia is a rich country, it should be richer, and if we have prospered so far, as you have said, in the last 50, 60 years, in spite of mismanagement, I think we will be far richer and already a high-income economy, if not for that mismanagement. Selangor has consistently done well, if not better, compared to the previous government. So has Penang. I don't believe ideological differences will be a barrier. In fact, I think it really shows that we are able to put these differences aside for the good of the people. So, track record speaks for itself. Thank you.
Thank you to our two panelist debaters today. And I invite you back to the panel and we will accept questions from the floor. May I ask the audience members with questions to please line up behind the mic and keep your questions concise. Yeah. Maybe Zairil? You may address your questions to either one of the speakers or to both of them at the same time, but I please urge you to keep the questions concise and on the topic of our discussion today. I will be taking 3 questions at a time. So the first question from the gentleman on the left, the second column, and I believe there's a gentleman in the middle. So can you please state the questions, sir?
Good afternoon. This question is directed to the Speaker of the proposition. Why do you refuse to engage on the issue of immigration? By pursuant of a decision or by default in which we never consulted, we find ourselves currently in strangers in our own land. Are we all just monetaries here? That just because immigration benefits the economy, so it is good? What about wage depression among the poor, the loss of the cultural hegemony? Are we all going to wait for what Enoch Powell called the rivers of blood until we finally wake up? Thank you.
Excuse me, sorry, could you repeat that question in a bit more concise manner? And a bit slower, yeah, sorry.
Why does the Speaker of the proposition refuse to engage on the issue of immigration?
Immigration?
To our country, yes.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, the lady in the second column.
Hi, I'm Natasha from Songwei University. This question is for Mr. Shahril. We can see that we have grown since the 1970s, but the question this debate asks, or the question that we ask, is that it's not whether we have grown since the Stone Age, but is that we are doing enough for further economic growth. Are we on the right track? If you want to do a comparison, let's do comparison. 30 years ago, we are richer than Korea. 20 years ago, we're richer than Indonesia. 10 years ago, we're richer than Thailand. And now, we're richer than Ghana. What's your response to that?
In the middle.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Henry from KU College.
Yes.
My question is, given the trajectory of our maturity education standards, which meant increasing competitive edge on the world stage, increasing natural resources, both of which are key drivers of our growth in the past. We have good education standards in the past and abundance of natural resources, but those are depleting. Do you think our growth is sustainable?
Is this for both speakers?
Yes.
Thank you. Address the first two first. On immigration, it's not that I refuse to engage with the idea of immigration. What I refused to engage with was the idea or the notion that having immigrants in this country was a bad thing. Or having immigrants in this country is somehow contradictory to the idea of helping local Malaysians in poorer conditions move up the economic chain. I think the point is here, obviously I understand there's a need to balance, to ensure that we prioritize our citizens first, of course. That's something that any country, any government in any country in the world will want to do. And what we need to be careful for is to descend to this idea that somehow foreigners, people who are trying to make a better life for themselves, we've got to remember that many of these people come from destitute conditions. They come to Malaysia. Alhamdulillah, our country offers in many cases a better life for people compared to where they come from. I think it's important to be empathetic and be sympathetic of that. So I guess that's basically where I was coming from. Not to say that we should not care about influx of foreign workers. Obviously we should, and forget about not just the low-income laborers, but even the expats. There's a tendency for us to just leave everything to the expats when you invest or when you deal with high technology, high knowledge matters. I think it's important to have transfer of knowledge at the highest levels as well. So to summarize, it's not that I'm ignoring the problem. I think what is important is to be careful about how we speak about this, because these are human beings, these are people as well. On the second point about not wallowing in the past, I was waiting for that. I knew somebody was going to call me out on that. I think what I was trying to do was really just set the stage. That's why I spent a couple of minutes to say, look, as much as you want to compare with Korea, you want to compare with China, you want to compare with Hong Kong, you want to compare with Singapore, there's something to be said also to look down. I mean, my parents actually, one of the favorite sayings to me were, jangan selalu tengok atas, tengok bawah juga. Because that's something that speaks to whether we are grateful, whether we're thankful about where we've come. Because we could easily have gone, way worse. That's not to say that we should be comfortable or that, just being okay, being normal is good enough. Of course not. And that's why we've got a series of plans. We've got the ETP, the National Transformation Program in totality, as well as the 11th Malaysia Plan, which, the details of which I'm not going to bother you, I'm not going to bore you with, but all indicate that there are clear plans, clear strategies to basically push us towards achieving high income status, which by any objective measure is going to be achieved by 2020. So that's my answer to that. Any comment on the okay, just very quickly, maybe I'll just leave education to Zairil, but on the idea of having our natural resources deplete, that's something I completely agree with. It's something that concerns me as well. And that's why, for example, you see in the past, I think 10 years ago, the share of government revenue, I think 40% of it came from petrodollars. Now I think it's gone down to 30%. So it's important for us to diversify the economy. I think some of the rating agencies have reflected their optimism of our economy because we've been able to broaden our tax base, because we've been able to diversify our economy. So short answer to that is there needs to be plans, and then there are in the 11th Malaysia Plan to make sure that we identify niche industries to make sure that we don't rely on just a couple of whole stock industries that we have in the past.
Sure. Zairil?
Thank you. Let's see. I'll just add a little bit of comment on the foreign labor. Now, when I mentioned foreign labor earlier, my point is this. An over-reliance on foreign labor obviously reduces the incentive for any SME, any company to automate and mechanize. Now, obviously, why do you need to buy an expensive machine and train your workers and pay them more when you can just get, obviously cheap, low-wage, low-skill labor to do the same job? Okay, and when I say this, I mean it in the context of the bottom 40% and the fact that it is depressing wages for them. I'll give you an example. In Australia, the guy who drives the garbage truck is a skilled worker because he operates the machinery. It's just one guy comes, collect the garbage, he puts it in, operates the machinery. He probably gets paid 3,000 Aussie dollars a month. In Malaysia, how do we collect garbage? We have one lorry, one Malaysian driver, maybe paid 900 ringgit a month, and 5 bangla behind collecting the rubbish. Now, all that added together is probably 3,000 ringgit a month. But instead of paying 5 foreign workers 600 ringgit a month, we can pay 1 Malaysian 3,000 ringgit a month. Isn't that better? So this is why we need to move away from our over-reliance on foreign labor. And we all know why there's a lot of foreign labor in Malaysia. Because foreign labor means permits. Who controls the permits for foreign labor? I think we all know the answer to that. There was a question on growth and sustainability and education, which was left to me, so I'll answer that. I'm afraid, obviously, our education system is not what it used to be. I think all of us agree. If you look at the results of international assessments, I mean, yes, every year our A-levels, O-levels, we still get the top scores, our SPM results. That's because these are all old method testing, right? It's all rote learning. If you know how to game the A-level and you know how to memorize, you obviously can get 3 A's or 3 A pluses. But the PISA assessment, the TIMSS assessment, these are done by OECD and other organizations. These actually test problem-solving skills. These assessments actually test thinking ability. And this is where we actually do badly in. We rank 52 out of 76 countries in terms of our students' thinking ability. Vietnam got 12 and Thailand got 47. In other words, our schools are now behind countries like Vietnam and Thailand. 51.8% of our students, this is ranging from 13 years old or so, do not have basic proficiency in mathematics. mathematics, one of the most core skills that a student needs. In the TIMS, which is the Trends in International Math and Science Study, also in another established international assessment, it found that only 2% of Malaysian students achieve advanced international benchmarks. This is compared to Taiwan, which got 49%, Singapore 48%, and South Korea 47%. I mean, okay, perhaps Shahril says we shouldn't compare ourselves to these countries, although I think we should, but 2% compared to 48%, I think it's a far cry. So obviously this points to a problem in our education system. Our schools are uncompetitive, our teachers are uncompetitive, and the question is why. I think I'll need a whole forum to go into that, but suffice to say, we have huge fundamental structural problems in our education system, which needs to be reformed and decentralized. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take another question from the gentleman on the right, the other gentleman on the right, and the gentleman on that final gentleman on the right? Please state your name and your institution.
Alright, my name is Muhammad Iqbal, also from Great University, Iowa. My question is that both of you have brilliant ideas and policies, but the thing that we're lacking of is that both opposition and government working with each other. So my question is that what are some initiatives that you have done or you plan to do for both party opposition and government to work with each other for the sake of Malaysia? You can fight during election, but after elections, work together. Thank you. Thank you. Gentleman on the right.
Yeah, my name is Philip. I'm from Taylor's College, Manjaya. Yeah, now, could I just divert the attention of the panelists to East Malaysia? Now, let's look at Sabah and Sarawak. What we see is that a lot of villages lack basic infrastructure such as roads, school buildings, electricity, and some even basic necessities such as water. Now, Mr. Shahril, you mentioned that yes, we've come a long way. I do not disagree with you on that, but how would you, as a representative of the Barisan National Coalition, answer for all the devastation that's been caused to the indigenous peoples in East Malaysia, such as the raping of their forests and the destruction of natural capital, despite Sarawak having such great oil revenues? And likewise, I'd like to ask YB, Johari also, if the opposition does take power over the federal government in the coming years, what would you do to reform the economic structures in East Malaysia to ensure that people there are given their fair share of our wealth? Thank you.
Thank you. Gentleman on the left, please state your name and please keep your question concise and limited to one.
Thank you. My name is Nurizat. I'm from Sunday College. My question is addressed to the government speaker. Mr. Shahril, you talked about how there has been improvement in corruption, in our fight against corruption in Malaysia. My question is, should government implement a policy to regulate funds, donorship from going into personal accounts of politicians and statesmen, especially those of high positions in our nation, for example, our Prime Minister? To put into perspective, 2.6 billion is enough money to give everyone here scholarships for a master's degree. What is your...
Thank you for the question. I think I'll pose it first to YB Zairil to answer the question from Iqbal and Philip. Perhaps YB Shari can.
Thanks. Actually, it's a very good question on working together. I know it seems like we're fighting all the time. You know, in truth, we do have a lot of friends and we do have strong relationship with many members on the other side. I think this is the case for many members of parliament. But when it comes to cooperation, actually there is right now one issue that we are cooperating on. It's